The red sun was setting behind the jagged hills of Vega Colony 7. Dust rose from the metal roads as workers left the mining zone. Their heavy boots clanging on steel plates, Mark Hale walked alone, his tool bag hanging from one shoulder. It had been a long day repairing old drilling machines. All he wanted was to get home, eat something warm, and sleep. The air smelled of metal and oil. A low wind whistled between the storage towers. Mark kept his head down, avoiding the glare of the setting sun. He had walked this same route every day for the past 3 years, and nothing ever changed until tonight. From the east, dark clouds began to gather quickly. They rolled in like a wave, covering the light of the sun. Mark stopped, frowning. A dust storm, and it was moving fast. The colony alarms began to sound a slow, deep siren that warned people to take shelter. Others nearby hurried to the nearest buildings. Mark looked around, but the road ahead was long and empty. The storm would reach him in less than a minute. He spotted an open cargo bay in an unused warehouse to his right. Without thinking, he ran, his boots slamming against the metal ground inside. The air was cooler, shadows covering the walls. Mark leaned against a crate, catching his breath. The storm outside howled, throwing dust and small stones against the doors. He waited, telling himself he'd just stay until the storm passed. But then, he heard something, a faint sound, like someone crying. Mark turned his head slowly. From the far corner of the cargo bay, he saw a movement. At first, it was just a dark shape. Then the shape stepped into a beam of light from a cracked window. It was a woman, but not human. Her skin was pale blue, marked with faint silver lines that shimmered when she moved. Her dark eyes were wide, and fear filled them. She wore a torn cloak, the fabric dirty from dust and travel. In her arms, she held a small child, no more than 4 years old. Another child clung to the edge of her cloak, hiding behind her legs. Mark froze. He had seen aliens before. The colony was full of traders and workers from many planets. But this was different. She looked fragile, exhausted. Her steps were slow, like she might fall at any moment. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. Her English was broken, each word careful. "You help us, or we die." Mark's brow tightened. "What happened to you?" he asked. She shook her head. Quickly, eyes darting toward the doors as if she feared someone might come in. "Bad men. They hunt us," she whispered. The little child in her arms let out a weak cough, the sound thin and dry. The older child pressed closer against her. Watching Mark with big, frightened eyes, Mark took a step forward, raising his hands, slightly to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "Who are you? What's your name?" She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. "Lyra," she said. "I am Lyra." From Treen, the name sparked a memory. The Treen were an alien race from the far rim, rarely seen this deep in human space. Mark remembered hearing something about a Treen village being attacked by space raiders months ago. He looked at the children again. Their clothes were worn, their faces tired. They had been through something terrible. "You shouldn't be out here," Mark said, glancing toward the raging dust storm outside. "You'll get caught in it." She nodded, her breath quick and uneven. "No home," she said. "No safe place. Only run, hide, add hope." Mark felt a strange pull in his chest. He had always kept to himself, never getting involved in other people's problems. But there was something in Lyra's eyes, a mix of pain and courage, that made it impossible to walk away still. He didn't understand why she had come to him. There were security officers in the colony who could help. Unless she was afraid of them too. The storm roared louder outside. Shaking the warehouse doors, dust swirled through the cracks in the walls. Mark glanced toward the far entrance and froze for just a moment. He thought he saw a movement in the shadow beyond the door, a tall shape, and the faint glint of metal. But then it was gone, hidden by the thick dust. When he looked back at Lyra, she was watching him closely. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They will come soon," she said, "if they find us." "We not live, Marks." Pulse quickened. "Who?" he asked. But she shook her head. "No time." "Please," she said again, stepping closer. Her eyes met his, desperate and unblinking. "Take us." With you, Mark stood still, torn between caution and instinct. The storm trapped them here for now, but outside, something or someone might be closing in. He didn't know who Lyra was or what danger she carried. Only that, if he left her here, she and her children would not survive the night. And for reasons he could not explain, that was something he could not allow. The storm outside raged like an angry beast. Metal panels rattled. Cata and dust seeped through the smallest cracks. Inside the dim cargo bay, Mark stood frozen, staring at Lyra. Her children clung to her, eyes wide, their small hands gripping the torn edges of her cloak. Mark felt the weight of her words pressing on him. "Take us." "With you," she had said. It wasn't just a request for shelter. There was something more in her voice. A strange urgency, as if time itself was against them. He took a slow breath. "I don't understand," he said, keeping his voice low. "Why me? There are other people in this colony. There's the security office, the refugee center." "No." Ara's voice was sharp, too sharp for someone so soft-spoken. She glanced toward the warehouse door again, her hands tightening around her. "Younger child, they are not safe," she said, her words quick and broken. "They send us away. To outer wastes. No law there, no food, no life." Mark frowned. He had heard of the outer wastes, a place beyond the main colony zones, where the air was thin, the ground poisonous, and only criminals and scavengers lived. It was a death sentence for anyone sent there, especially for a woman with 2 small children. "You said bad men were after you?" Mark said carefully. "Who are they?" "Raiders." Lyra's lips trembled. She lowered her head, hiding her face for a moment. "Some raiders," she whispered. "Some humans from here. They work together." Mark's chest tightened. If she was telling the truth, then the people after her weren't just outsiders. They could be part of the colony's own power. If that was the case, going to the authorities might only hand her straight to the enemy. "Then what do you want from me?" he asked. Lyra lifted her head slowly, and her next words made his mind stop. "Marry me?" she said. Mark blinked. Sure he'd heard wrong. What? Her gaze didn't waver on this colony, she said. "A human citizen can claim alien as family if you take me as wife, me and my children. We get human protection." Mark stared at her. The idea was absurd. He had met her less than 10 minutes ago. Marriage wasn't something you just agreed to in the middle of a dust storm. And yet, there was something in her tone. She wasn't saying it like a romantic plea. It was survival, pure and desperate. "That's crazy," Mark said finally, shaking his head. "I don't even know you. Why would I do that?" Lyra's eyes softened, but there was no weakness in them. "Because you are kind," she said quietly. "Because, my children, they will not last much longer." The younger child let out another dry cough, his small body trembling in her arms. The older one looked pale, his lips dry and cracked. Mark felt his jaw tighten. He could tell they hadn't eaten much in days, maybe longer. The storm outside roared louder. Somewhere in the distance, a metallic bang echoed like something heavy hitting the ground. Mark's eyes flicked to the door. "What happens if I say no?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. Lyra's face didn't change. "Then we run again," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "And maybe we don't run far enough." Mark looked at her for a long time. Every sensible thought told him to walk away. He had his own life, his own problems. Getting involved in whatever trouble she carried could ruin everything. But the truth was, walking away would be harder than staying, because if he left her here, he would always know exactly what happened next. And that knowledge would never let him sleep again. Finally, he exhaled. "All right," he said. Her eyes widened slightly. "But if we do this, I need to know the truth about everything," Mark added. "Who's after you? Why they're after you? No more secrets." Lyra hesitated, looking down at her children. "Some truths will hurt you," she said. Mark almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I've been hurt before." He said, "I'll survive." The storm began to ease. The sound of the wind dropping bit by bit. But that only made the air heavier inside the warehouse, because soon the danger outside could move freely again. Mark pulled his coat tighter. "Come on," he said. "The registry office will be open for another hour. If we're doing this, we need to go now." Lyra gave a small nod, holding her children close as she followed him toward the side door. But just before they stepped outside, she froze. Mark followed her gaze and felt a chill run through him. Two tall figures stood in the thinning dust, their armor black, their helmets smooth and featureless. They didn't move, but their presence alone was enough to make the hair on Mark's neck stand up. Lyra's grip on his arm tightened. "They have found us," she whispered. Mark didn't wait. "Move," he said sharply, and together they slipped into the maze of storage buildings, not knowing if they would reach the registry alive. The night air outside was cold and dry. Dust still swirled in the streets. Carried by the dying breath of the storm, Mark kept his head low as he moved through the narrow alleys. Lyra followed close, clutching her children to her chest. Every few steps, she glanced over her shoulder. Mark didn't need to look. He could feel the presence of the two armored figures somewhere behind them. "Stay close to the wall," Mark whispered. They slipped past a shuttered shop and a row of abandoned cargo containers. The glow of the main road was ahead. Brighter lights, more people, safety. Or at least, that was the hope when they reached the corner. Mark peeked out. The street was busy with miners returning home. Machines rumbled by, carrying supplies to the upper colony sectors. The black armored pursuers were nowhere in sight, but Mark's gut told him they weren't gone. They were waiting, watching, registries on the far side of the plaza. He said. Lyra nodded, holding her children tighter. One of them let out a soft whimper. Mark took the lead, stepping into the flow of the crowd. The noise and movement swallowed them up. The registry building was tall, its walls made of smooth white alloy. Bright lights lit the entrance, and a line of people waited outside. Mark moved them quickly into the queue. It wasn't long before a clerk called them forward. The clerk was a middle-aged man with tired eyes. He looked at Mark, then at Lyra and the children's name. He asked, fingers ready on the console. "Mark Hale," Mark replied. The clerk nodded, entering it into the system. "And what's your business tonight?" Mark hesitated, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. "I'm here to register a family claim," he said. The clerk's eyebrows rose slightly. "A family claim? For them?" He glanced at Lyra, his expression unreadable. "Yes," Mark said firmly. "I'm taking them as my family." The clerk looked from Mark to Lyra again. "You know the rules, Hale? This isn't just a piece of paper. A claim means legal protection, permanent residence rights, and I know the rules." Mark cut in. "I'm doing it." The man leaned back in his chair. "All right. Then let's start with a relationship. Wife, sister, cousin, wife," Mark said before he could think twice. Lyra's eyes flicked toward him, not surprised, but serious. The clerk typed. "Then you'll need to sign the protection bond," he said. "It's law here. Any human citizen can take an alien under their protection by marriage or blood claim. But if you break the bond, it's a heavy fine and possible jail time." Mark nodded. Understood. The clerk slid a thin metal pad across the counter. Mark pressed his thumb to it, feeling the scanner read his ID chip. Lyra hesitated when the pad was passed to her. She looked at Mark, searching his face for something, then pressed her slender hand onto the pad. The screen flashed. Protection bond accepted immediate effect. Just like that, Lyra and her children were now legally tied to him. Mark felt a strange weight settle on his shoulders. Not regret, not exactly. More like the knowledge that life had just changed forever. The clerk handed them a small card. "This is your family record," he said. "Guards will now have to recognize your protection rights. No one can deport them without a court order. Keep it safe." Mark slipped the card into his coat pocket as they stepped back into the street. Lyra let out a slow breath. For the first time since meeting her, he saw a flicker of relief in her eyes, but it was faint and brief. "We are safe now?" she asked quietly. Mark hesitated, scanning the shadows around them. "For now," he said. But deep down, he knew that a piece of paper wouldn't stop the kind of people who had been hunting her. They walked in silence toward the transit station. Mark planned to take them to his apartment for the night. It wasn't much, a small unit above the machine repair shop, but it would keep them off the streets. Halfway there, he caught movement in the corner of his eye. A tall shape stepped out of an alley, black armor glinting under the streetlights. Mark's stomach tightened. Lyra's hand found his arm, her grip almost painful. The figure didn't follow. It just stood there, helmet turned in their direction, watching. Mark forced himself to keep walking. The last thing he wanted was a scene in front of the other colonists, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the bond he had just signed had put him directly in the crosshairs. When they finally reached his building, Mark unlocked the heavy metal door and guided them inside. The warm air smelled faintly of oil and old machinery. Lyra's children looked around wide-eyed, unused to the safety of 4 solid walls. "You can stay here tonight," Mark said. "I'll find extra blankets." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. "You do not have to do this," she said softly. Mark gave a short laugh. "It's a little late for that now." She nodded, then lowered her gaze in the quiet of the room. Mark realized something important. He had taken her into his life without asking why she was being hunted, without knowing what danger might follow her here, and now, whether he liked it or not, her fight was his fight. Outside, somewhere in the streets below, a low metallic hum echoed briefly, then faded, but Mark was certain it would return. Night settled over Vega Colony 7. The streets outside were quiet now. Only the distant hum of generators and the soft buzz of neon lights breaking the silence. Mark sat in his small kitchen, a mug of lukewarm tea in his hands. Across the narrow room, Lyra sat on the floor beside her children, helping them eat the simple meal he had put together. Bread, dried fruit, and a bit of reheated soup. The children ate quickly, as if afraid the food might vanish if they waited too long. Lyra, however, only took small bites, her eyes moving constantly to the window and the locked door. Mark noticed, but said nothing for now. He didn't want to push too hard. Still, the questions were building inside him like steam in a pressure tank. When the children finally fell asleep, curled under the extra blankets Mark had found, he spoke. "You're looking for trouble even inside locked walls," he said quietly. Lyra didn't answer. She kept her gaze on the window, watching the faint red glow of the distant mining towers. "Those men in black armor," Mark continued, "they didn't just stumble across you by chance, did they?" Lyra's jaw tightened. Her silver-marked skin seemed to catch the dim light, making her look even more otherworldly. "They know where I go," she said softly. "They follow. Always close, but not close enough for others to see." Mark leaned back in his chair. "You realize that now because of this bond. They'll see me as part of your problem too. Lyra's eyes finally met his. "That is why I asked you before," she said. "I did not want to give you my danger without choice." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Well, choice or not, it's mine now for a while." Neither of them spoke. The small clock on the wall ticked, the sound strangely loud in the stillness. Then, from somewhere outside, came a faint metallic click. Mark's body went still. It was a sound he knew well, the sound of a rifle's safety being switched off. He stood and moved to the window, careful to stay in the shadows. Down in the street, two figures were walking slowly past the building. Their black armor caught the streetlight in quick flashes, helmets turned slightly, scanning the area. Mark's hands curled into fists. They weren't even hiding anymore. They wanted him and Lyra to know they were there. When he turned back, Lyra was already on her feet. Her children still slept, but she moved with quiet urgency. "They are not patient men," she whispered. "They will try to break you until you give me up." Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then you'd better tell me exactly why they're after you. Because if I'm going to stand between them and you, I need to know what I'm fighting for a long moment." Lyra didn't speak. Her gaze moved to her children, then back to him. "They think I have something," she said finally. "Something my husband made before he died. Something they will kill for." Mark felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of something?" "Crystal," she said. Her voice was almost a whisper. "It holds energy, more than a ship's reactor. It can power cities, or destroy them." Mark stared at her. "That sounds like something the colony's governor would be locking in a vault, not chasing down in the streets." Lyra shook her head. "The governor? He is part of them." Mark swore under his breath. It was worse than he'd thought. This wasn't a fight between a refugee and a few criminals. It was the colony's own leadership hunting her, using their authority to keep it hidden. Before he could respond, the lights in the room flickered. Then they went out completely. The hum of the building's generator died into silence. Mark's instincts kicked in instantly. "Get away from the window," he ordered. Lyra didn't hesitate. She pulled her children close and moved toward the back wall. Mark grabbed the old pulse wrench he kept on the shelf. It wasn't a weapon, but in a fight, it would do damage outside. Footsteps echoed on the metal. Stairs leading up to the apartment, slow, deliberate steps. Mark's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. They were enjoying the moment. The first knock was gentle, almost polite. Then came another, louder, "Open up." A deep voice called through the door. "You've got something that belongs to us." Mark kept his voice steady. "You've got the wrong place." A short pause, then the voice again, colder now. "No. We don't." Lyra's children whimpered quietly in the dark. Mark stepped closer to the door, pulse wrench ready. He didn't know how far these men would go, but one thing was certain. If they came through that door tonight, there would be no going back. The sound of boots shifted on the metal landing. Then, after a tense silence, the footsteps began to retreat. Mark waited, every muscle tight. When the sound finally faded, he turned back to Lyra. "They'll try again," she said, her voice calm but certain. "They always do." Mark nodded slowly. "Then next time, we'll be ready." The next morning, the colony looked calm. The storm was gone. The sky above Vega Colony 7 was pale yellow. Miners walked to work, traders opened their stalls, and children hurried to the learning halls. But to Mark, the quiet streets felt like a trap. The black-armored men could be anywhere, waiting, watching, inside his apartment. Mark paced. He hadn't slept much, every creak in the building making him sit up and listen. Lyra sat at the small table, her children still curled up under blankets in the corner. Her face was tired, but her eyes were alert. She had the look of someone who had been hunted for a long time. "We can't keep doing this," Mark said finally. "They'll come back. And next time they won't just knock." Lyra nodded slowly. "They will not stop," she said. "Not until they have the crystal." Mark stopped pacing. Then, "It's time you tell me exactly what it is." Lyra's hands tightened around the cup she was holding. She looked down, as if searching for the right words. "My husband." "His name was Corin," she began. "He was a scientist for the Trine Council. He studied energy, not just power for ships and homes, but raw, living energy from the heart of stars." Mark frowned. "That sounds like a story for a science journal, not something raiders would care about." Lyra's eyes lifted to his. "This energy can heal. Or kill," she said quietly. "If used the right way, it can feed whole colonies for hundreds of years. No more mining, no more fuel wars, but in wrong hands. It can burn cities to ash in seconds." Mark felt a chill run through him. "You're saying your husband built something that dangerous?" Lyra shook her head. "He did not build. He grew it." Mark blinked. "Grew it." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small pouch. From it, she lifted a crystal no bigger than a coin. It was clear at first glance, but as it caught, the light faint colors swirled inside, moving like smoke trapped in glass. It gave off a soft hum, almost like it was alive. Mark stepped closer. The thing looked harmless, but he could feel warmth coming from it. Not like heat from a lamp, it felt deeper, almost like it was touching the inside of his chest. "This is only a seed," Lyra said. "Corin made one larger, much larger. He gave it to me before. The raiders came, told me to hide it, told me never to let anyone find it, but they killed him before he could explain everything." Mark stared at the crystal in her hand. "So the men chasing you, they want the big one?" "Yes," she said. "They think if they take me, I will lead them to it, but they are wrong. I hid it where only I can find it." Mark rubbed his forehead. "This is insane," he muttered. "You're telling me you've been carrying around something that half the colony's criminal network would kill for, and now it's in my home." Lyra's expression hardened. "You said you wanted the truth," she reminded him. "This is it." He looked at her. Frustration and disbelief mixing in his chest. "This isn't just about helping a widow and her kids anymore," he said. "This is a war waiting to happen." Her voice softened. "I know," she said. "That is why I need you. Not just to hide me, but to help me finish what Corin started." Mark almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want me to protect you from assassins, fight corrupt officials, and, what? Build a miracle power source in my garage?" Lyra's lips curved. In the faintest smile, "You fix machines," she said. "You fix broken things." "This is just another machine." Before Mark could answer, a sharp noise cut through the air, the sound of glass shattering. He spun toward the window. A small metal sphere rolled across the floor. Hissing, smoke began to pour from it, thick and acrid, down. Mark shouted. He grabbed Lyra and pushed her toward the back room. The children coughed, eyes watering, through the smoke. Mark could see shadows moving outside, boots hitting the stairs. The black-armored men were here. Mark slammed the door to the back room and locked it. "Stay here," he ordered. He grabbed his pulse wrench and moved back toward the main room. The front door burst open, metal buckling under the force. Two armored figures stepped inside, rifles raised. Mark didn't wait. He swung the wrench at the first one. The hit knocked the rifle aside, sparks flying as metal struck metal. The second soldier moved in, but Mark kicked the broken doorframe into his leg, slowing him down. It was chaos, smoke, shouting. The thud of boots on the floor. Mark fought with desperate speed, knowing every second counted. Finally, with one last swing, he knocked the first man to the ground. The second stepped back toward the door. A voice from outside shouted, "Fall back. Too much attention." And just like that, they were gone. The smoke began to thin. Mark stood in the wreck of his apartment, chest heaving. Lyra stepped out of the back room, her children clinging to her. "They will come again," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were darker now. "They will not stop until one of us is dead." Mark looked at her, then at the crystal still clutched in her hand. His choice was already made, even if he didn't say it out loud. If these men wanted a fight, they'd get one. The smoke still clung to the walls. Mark's lungs burned as he shoved the last of his tools into a small pack. Lyra stood near the doorway with her children, her cloak wrapped tightly around them. She looked ready to move, but her eyes kept scanning the window. She knew as well as Mark that they didn't have much time. "They'll be back," Mark said, pulling a power cell from the charger and slipping it into his coat. "Not tonight," Lyra answered. "They'll wait for morning, when the streets are full." Easier to disappear in the crowd, Mark shook his head. "That's why we're not waiting for morning." He moved to the hidden hatch in the floor, a small maintenance tunnel that connected his building to the old mining sector. It hadn't been used in years, but he'd kept it clear, just in case he ever needed to vanish. Tonight, that just in case had arrived. Lyra's children peered down into the dark tunnel, eyes wide. "Will it take us far?" she asked. "Far enough to reach the lower transit lines," Mark said. "If we can get to the abandoned spaceport, we can find a ship out of here." The word ship seemed to spark hope in Lyra's gaze, but Mark could see the fear underneath. Leaving the colony wouldn't end the danger, would only take them to a bigger playing field. They descended into the tunnel. The air was stale and carried the faint scent of rust. Mark took the lead, using a small handlight to guide the way. The walls were lined with old pipes, some dripping slowly into shallow puddles on the floor. Every sound seemed too loud in the narrow space. The splash of their steps, the soft cough of Lyra's youngest, the occasional creak of metal settling overhead. Mark kept checking behind them. No sign of pursuit yet, but that didn't mean they were alone. After 20 minutes of moving through twisting paths, they reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Mark crouched to check the old colony map painted on the wall. "We need to go left," he said. "That'll take us under the east loading docks. From there, we climb up," and a faint clanging echoed through the tunnels. It came from behind them, metal boots on metal floor. The sound was far away, but getting closer. "Move," Mark hissed. They hurried left. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to move single file. Mark pushed himself faster, every muscle tense. The sound of pursuit grew louder. The armored men had found the hatch, and now they were in the tunnels too. They reached a rusted ladder that led up to a metal hatch. Mark climbed first, pushing the hatch open just enough to peek through. Above was a dark, empty dock filled with old cargo crates. He climbed out and helped Lyra and the children up. Then he pulled the hatch shut, locking it with an old bar, but the lock wouldn't hold them for long. Mark scanned the dock. It was a maze of containers and loading arms. "Stay low," he whispered. They moved quickly, weaving between the crates. Every few seconds, Mark glanced over his shoulder. No one yet. But the silence was too sharp. Halfway across the dock, a shadow shifted ahead of them. Mark froze, raising a hand to stop Lyra. A figure stepped out from behind a crate, tall, armored, rifle in hand. The helmet turned toward them. Then, without a word, the man raised his weapon. Mark grabbed a loose cargo hook from the ground and hurled it with all his strength. It slammed into the man's helmet, making him stagger back. "Run!" Mark shouted. They sprinted through the maze. Shouts echoed behind them, more soldiers joining the chase. The far side of the dock opened into a service corridor. At the end of it was the faint glow of street lights, the outer edge of the old spaceport. If they could make it there, they might have a chance, but halfway down the corridor, more soldiers appeared, blocking the exit. Mark's heart pounded. They were trapped. Then Lyra stepped forward, pulling the small crystal from her cloak. She held it high, and for a moment the corridor was filled with soft, swirling light. The soldiers froze, as if hypnotized. Mark felt a strange warmth in his chest. Even the children stopped breathing for a second. "Go," Lyra said, her voice steady. Mark grabbed the children's hands and pulled them toward a side door, while Lyra kept the soldiers' attention. At the last second, she turned and followed. Slamming the door behind them, they burst into the open air of the spaceport. It was huge but silent, rows of abandoned ships resting under the dim glow of old lights. Dust covered everything, but a few ships looked intact. Mark spotted a small cargo hauler near the far wall. "That one," he said, pointing. They ran for it, behind them. The sound of boots and shouts grew louder again. Mark reached the ship's ramp, punching the access code into the panel for a tense second. Nothing happened. Then the ramp lowered with a slow hiss. Inside, he ordered Lyra and the children scrambled up. Mark followed, slamming the controls to raise the ramp again. Through the narrowing gap, he saw the black-armored soldiers spill into the hangar. Rifles ready, the engines coughed, then roared too. Mark gripped the controls, hands steady despite the chaos outside. As the cargo hauler lifted from the ground, blaster fire lit the hangar, but they were already rising. Already leaving Vega Colony 7 behind. In the pilot's seat, Mark didn't look back. They weren't safe yet, but for the first time, they had a head start. The stars stretched endlessly outside the ship's cockpit. Mark guided the small cargo hauler through the black void, hands tight on the controls. The hum of the engines was steady, but his heart was not behind him in the narrow passenger cabin. Lyra sat with her children wrapped in blankets, whispering softly in her own language. For a moment, Mark allowed himself to think they'd made it. No alarms, no flashing sensors, no enemy ships in sight, just the quiet peace of deep space. But peace in his life had never lasted long, and he doubted it would start now. "You handled that ship like you've been flying all your life," Lyra said quietly, stepping into the cockpit. Mark shrugged. "Piloting isn't that hard when you're running for your life," he replied. A faint smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Somewhere they can't find us," Mark said. "That list isn't very long." She murmured. "No," Mark agreed. "But I know a few places that don't exactly follow the colony's rules." Lyra looked down at the crystal. In her hands, turning it slowly, so the soft, swirling light inside danced across her fingers. "They will not stop," she said. "Even if we hide, they will search. And when they find us, they will kill anyone who stands in their way." Mark didn't answer right away. He knew she was right. The men in black armor weren't bounty hunters working for a quick payout. They were soldiers in a bigger game. A game that didn't end until the other side was destroyed. "Then maybe," Mark said slowly, "we don't hide." Her eyes lifted to him. "What do you mean?" "We find out who's running them," he said. "Not just the soldiers, the ones giving orders. The ones who want that crystal. If we take them down, there's no one left to chase you." Lyra studied him for a long moment. "You are a strange man," she said finally. "You could have left me in the dust storm. But you didn't. Now you talk about fighting people you cannot see." Mark smirked faintly. "I've always been bad at walking away." The ship's console beeped suddenly. Mark's eyes narrowed as he checked the display. A faint energy signature had appeared behind them, distant, but moving in the same direction, not close enough to see, but close enough to track. "They found us," Mark muttered. Lyra's fingers tightened on the crystal. "How?" she whispered. Mark didn't answer. He already knew the answer. They hadn't just been chasing her. They'd been tracking the crystal itself. "We need to shut that thing down," he said, nodding toward it. "It's not just a power source. It's a beacon." Lyra hesitated. "If I turn it off, I cannot turn it on again without the larger crystal. Then we find another way to throw them off." Mark said. He switched the ship's course sharply. Diving toward a nearby asteroid field, the stars vanished behind a curtain of rock and shadow. Small asteroids drifted lazily, but the larger ones spun slowly, their surfaces jagged and dark. "This place will mess with their scanners," Mark said, weaving the ship between the drifting stones. "But it'll mess with ours too," Lyra warned. "Good," Mark said. "It's a fair fight now." For the next hour, they stayed in the maze of rock and dust. Mark kept the engines low to avoid heat trails. Finally, the scanners showed nothing. No pursuit. No tracking signal. Just silence. Lyra leaned back in her seat. "For now." "We are ghosts," she said. "Let's keep it that way," Mark replied. But the quiet didn't feel like safety. It felt like the pause before something bigger. After some time, Mark set the autopilot and turned to face her. "You know," he said, "we never really talked about this. The bond we signed." Lyra tilted her head. "You mean the paper that says I am your wife?" "Yeah," Mark said, scratching his jaw. "It was supposed to be just for protection. After tonight. I don't think either of us can just walk away." Lyra looked at her sleeping children in the corner. "They already see you as family," she said quietly. Mark's chest tightened. The thought of leaving them now felt impossible. "Then maybe it's not just paper anymore," he said. She didn't answer right away, but there was a warmth in her gaze now that hadn't been there before. The console beeped again. Mark turned quickly, expecting another pursuer. But the signal was different this time. A coded transmission, old and weak. He ran it through the ship's decryption. The message was short, only 5 words. "We know where it is." Lyra's face went pale. "They are not talking about this crystal," she said, holding up the small one. "They mean the large one." Mark's pulse quickened. "They found it." She nodded slowly. "If they take it, no one will be able to stop them." The small cargo hauler drifted in silence for a moment. Then Mark leaned forward, his jaw set. "Then we don't run anymore," he said. "We go after it first." Lyra studied him, then gave a single firm nod. Her children still slept, unaware of the choice being made above their heads, the choice that would change all their lives outside. The asteroid field turned slowly in the darkness, and somewhere far beyond it, a war waited to begin.